Donald Trump has found a new enemy because South Africa, along with the European Union and China, are making moves. They want to punish America's biggest tech titans.
And we were able, on our own, and we will find solutions for our problems. So stay out of our issues.
Something unprecedented just unfolded, and it's sending shockwaves through Washington. 13 African nations didn't just say no to the United States, they shut the door on Donald Trump himself. Lavish aid packages, military alliances, and exclusive trade deals were all offered, and one by one these countries walked away. Why? Because behind the glossy promises were demands that cut deep-cut ties with China, hand over strategic resources, and toe the line on American foreign policy. What Trump framed as Partnership Africa saw as pressure a new face for old imperialism. Launched in early 2025, Trump's campaign to reassert U.S. influence on the continent was meant to be a comeback. Instead, it became a standoff. From Ghana to Egypt, Africa responded with clarity. We don't trade sovereignty for favors. This isn't just diplomatic friction, it's a turning point. The old playbook of control through aid and coercion is breaking down. In its place, a new narrative is rising, one where African nations chart their own course. In this video, we're unpacking every move. 13 countries, 13 rejections, one global message: Africa is choosing independence over interference. In February 2025, Uganda was offered a $450 million U.S. tech package to modernize its digital infrastructure. Behind the glossy pitch were alarming conditions. U.S. firms like Palantir and Raytheon would control Uganda's national data centers for 15 years, gain unrestricted access to mobile and internet data, and demand the removal of Huawei and ZTE providers of over 65% of Uganda's telecom backbone. President Yoweri Museveni publicly rejected the offer on February 14th, declaring, "Our sovereignty is not negotiable, not for cables, not for code." His words ignited national protests. Over 38,000 people marched in cities like Kampala and Jinja under banners reading, "Our data, our nation." Instead of folding, Uganda doubled down. Just 10 days later, it signed a $1.1 billion 5G expansion deal with Huawei and ratified the African Union's Continental Data Sovereignty Charter. The USMS retaliated by freezing $62 million in aid and withdrawing tech advisors, but the damage was done. A March 2025 Afrobarometer poll showed 75.4% of Ugandans supported the rejection and 81% demanded data sovereignty. Uganda's digital economy, worth $2.3 billion in 2024, is projected to double by 2030, making foreign control a dangerous gamble. Museveni summed it up. "Our nation was never colonized by code, and it never will be. Uganda's future will not be downloaded from someone else's server. Africa's digital freedom is no longer optional, it's essential." In January 2025, the Trump administration offered Morocco a $1.2 billion aid package, including defense technology, satellite infrastructure, and trade concessions. But the cost: Morocco would be required to fully normalize relations with Israel, open an embassy in Rabat, and publicly support the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. King Mohammed VI responded with a rare national address. "Morocco's principles are not for sale. We will not trade dignity for dollars." The backlash was swift. Massive protests broke out in Casablanca, Rabat, and Marrakesh, with over 120,000 demonstrators flooding the streets under banners reading "Palestine first" and "Jerusalem is not for sale." The U.S. pushed back by halting a proposed $400 million arms deal and suspending diplomatic visits. But Morocco did not waver. Days later, the government signed new defense and tech agreements with Turkey and Qatar and reaffirmed its commitment to the Arab League's stance on Palestine. Polling from Maghreb Research Group in February 2025 revealed that 87% of Moroccans opposed normalization tied to foreign pressure, and 91% supported King Mohammed VI's rejection of the U.S. plan. With deep cultural and religious ties to Palestine, Morocco made it clear no foreign aid can erase history or identity. "We do not accept coercion," the king said. For Washington, it was a diplomatic defeat. For Morocco, it was a stand for sovereignty and solidarity. Nigeria turned down a multi-billion-dollar USS proposal that would have restructured its oil industry. The Trump administration's offer included advanced energy technology and new trade incentives. But in return, Nigeria would be required to hand over majority control, more than 50% of its national oil assets, to American corporations. That proposal triggered immediate outrage. Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation and its largest oil producer, generates over 90% of its export earnings from petroleum. Surrendering control of that lifeline was seen as economic suicide. Editorials across Nigerian media branded the deal as modern colonization in disguise. Politicians from both ruling and opposition parties denounced the offer, and in a rare moment of unity, the country's National Assembly issued a unanimous resolution rejecting any foreign ownership of core national resources. The president responded with a televised address declaring, "We are not for sale, not our oil, not our future." The fallout was seismic. The U.S. threatened sanctions, but Nigeria responded by accelerating new energy partnerships. Within weeks, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation signed a $2.4 billion joint venture with a Chinese firm and entered a trade agreement with Brazil on refined oil products. Polls showed 81% of Nigerians supported the government's decision. Rather than bow to pressure, Nigeria set an example for the continent's sovereignty and self-reliance come before foreign incentives no matter who offers them. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Is this a turning point for global power? In 2025, South Africa shocked international observers by turning down a sweeping U.S. offer of billions in trade benefits and military technology. The catch: Washington demanded that South Africa leave its strategic alliance with Brazil, Russia, India, and China, a partnership that has defined the country's global diplomacy for over a decade. The response from Pretoria was swift and unapologetic. President Cyril Ramaphosa stated firmly, "We are not pawns on anyone's chessboard." The proposal was seen as an attempt to fracture South-South cooperation and isolate China and Russia. In return for exit, South Africa would have received expanded access to U.S. military systems, preferential trade on manufactured goods, and $3 billion in agricultural exports. But the political cost was too high. Protests erupted in Cape Town and Johannesburg, where youth groups and political activists marched under banners reading "Hands off BRICS" and "No to economic blackmail." The parliament responded by fast-tracking legislation to deepen cooperation with BRICS nations, including a new $1.8 billion tech and energy investment deal with China and a logistics corridor project with Russia. Within weeks, the U.S. retaliated with increased tariffs on South African steel and citrus exports. Yet public support for the government's position soared. A March 2025 poll revealed that 76% of South Africans supported remaining in the BRICS alliance over accepting U.S. incentives. South Africa's message was clear: alliances are built on mutual respect, not coercion. In 2025, Kenya stunned Washington by rejecting a $3 billion U.S. development package that promised sweeping infrastructure improvements. But behind the glossy figures were deeply controversial conditions the Trump administration demanded: control over major national infrastructure, including ports, highways, and railways, by handing operations over to U.S. private contractors. Even more alarming, the agreement included provisions giving U.S. courts jurisdiction over all economic disputes, overriding Kenyan legal authority. The backlash was immediate. Kenyan opposition leader Raila Odinga condemned the deal as economic occupation in disguise, and civil society groups launched a national campaign under the slogan, "Our nation is not for sale." Over 200,000 people signed a petition within 48 hours calling for full transparency on foreign agreements. President William Ruto responded decisively, calling a press conference to announce the cancellation of the deal. "Our institutions are not for sale. Our laws are not negotiable," he declared. Despite U.S. disappointment, Kenya pivoted quickly. Within 2 weeks, the country secured a $2.2 billion infrastructure loan from the African Development Bank. Simultaneously, it signed a digital infrastructure agreement with India and a highway modernization project with South Korea. These alternatives came without demands for sovereignty concessions. According to a March 2025 Ipsos poll, 82% of Kenyans supported the government's rejection of the U.S. offer. Kenya's choice sent a strong message: modernization must not come at the expense of independence or justice. In 2025, Algeria decisively rejected a U.S. counterterrorism deal worth over $700 million, which included advanced surveillance tools, satellite access, and artificial intelligence-powered intelligence platforms. The catch: Algeria was expected to provide real-time intelligence on neighboring countries Libya, Mali, and Niger, effectively turning its security services into a proxy extension of U.S. regional interests. President Abdelmajid Tebboune responded with a televised statement: "We are not your informants." The deal was deemed a violation of Algeria's long-standing policy of non-interference and military neutrality. Within hours, Algeria's intelligence directorate reportedly shredded the agreement and expelled 2 U.S. security advisors. Algeria has historically maintained one of the most autonomous intelligence services in Africa. With a defense budget of over $10 billion in 2024 and military cooperation primarily tied to Russia and China, The country has little interest in becoming an instrument of foreign powers. Public sentiment echoed the government's stance. Student unions, military veterans, and legal experts united in opposition, accusing the U.S. of attempting to compromise Algerian sovereignty. In response to the rejection, Washington suspended all surveillance cooperation and canceled a high-level diplomatic visit scheduled for March. But Algeria didn't flinch. Instead, it announced a $1 billion cybersecurity partnership with Russia and began talks with the African Union to establish a pan-African intelligence-sharing framework led by African states. For Algeria, neutrality isn't just tradition, it's policy, and that's not up for sale. In one of the most politically explosive moments of 2025, in early 2025, Trump launched a bold plan to reassert American dominance in Africa. But instead of submission, the continent sent back a thunderous response. We will not be bought. From Ghana to Egypt, these countries didn't just walk away. They exposed a deeper battle over sovereignty, dignity, and who gets to shape the future of global power. And now the rules are changing. Stay with us, because we're breaking it down country by country, demand by demand, revealing how Africa's defiance could rewrite the global playbook. Like, comment, and subscribe to Huge Battle, because the stories they don't want you to hear are exactly the ones we bring to light. In early 2025, Ghana made international waves by rejecting a $500 million aid package offered by the Trump administration. The deal came with steep conditions. Ghana was required to cut its growing economic ties with China and allow the U.S. military to operate strategic bases along its coastline. For a nation that has long prided itself on self-determination, these demands were unacceptable. The proposed deal would have jeopardized ongoing Chinese-funded infrastructure programs, including over $2 billion in development tied to bauxite extraction and the construction of hundreds of kilometers of roads and bridges. The agreement also attempted to grant the U.S. intelligence access and veto power over Chinese-backed projects, effectively surrendering control over Ghana's economic future. The U.S. responded by canceling diplomatic visas for several senior Ghanaian officials. But Ghana stood firm. Instead of backing down, the country reinforced its trade partnerships within the African Economic Community and deepened its Belt and Road cooperation with China. Civic groups rallied in support, holding demonstrations demanding the preservation of national sovereignty. According to a poll conducted in February 2025, nearly 72% of Ghanaians supported the deal, viewing it as a proud stand against neo-colonial tactics. Ghana's leaders made it clear the price of development cannot be the loss of independence. Aid is welcome, but not at the cost of becoming someone else's pawn. But that was just the beginning. Wait until you see how the Nigerian fired back. In one of the most defiant rejections of 2025, Ethiopia stood firm in 2025 when the Trump administration proposed transforming the country into a key drone operations hub for U.S. military activity in East Africa. The offer came with $400 million in security aid, surveillance infrastructure, and military equipment. But hidden in the deal were clauses demanding full access to Ethiopian airspace, U.S. authority over drone missions, and unrestricted intelligence sharing, all without Ethiopian oversight. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed rejected the deal outright. "We do not lease our sovereignty," he declared, setting off a wave of national pride. Ethiopia has long been known for resisting colonial and neo-colonial pressures, and this moment echoed that legacy. The public responded quickly. Over 30,000 protesters flooded the streets of Addis Ababa carrying signs reading "No bases, no bosses." Military experts warned that hosting U.S. drone operations would make Ethiopia a target for extremist retaliation and destabilize its regional neutrality. In response to the rejection, Washington slashed military aid by 40%, froze bilateral defense talks, and warned of diplomatic consequences. But Ethiopia moved in a different direction. Within weeks, it signed a military tech exchange agreement with Turkey and expanded its own domestic drone development program. By March 2025, Ethiopia's homegrown drone output had doubled compared to the previous year. A national survey showed 79% of Ethiopians backed the government's decision, proving once again that strategic independence is a value no foreign offer can buy. The next country didn't just reject the deal, they exposed everything behind it. Tanzania made headlines in 2025 after rejecting a U.S. health aid package valued at over $600 million. The offer included modern medical equipment, vaccines, and funding for public health programs. But buried in the agreement were alarming terms. Tanzania would become a primary test site for experimental pharmaceutical trials with minimal oversight, unclear liability protections, and little regulatory transparency. President Samia Suluhu Hassan issued a direct rebuke. "We are not guinea pigs for foreign laboratories," she declared during a nationally televised address. Her statement ignited support from civil rights groups, medical professionals, and human rights organizations across the continent. The backlash stemmed from historical trauma. Between 1990 and 2010, multiple African countries, including Nigeria and Uganda, were involved in controversial drug trials linked to Western pharmaceutical firms, many without proper consent frameworks. Tanzanians weren't willing to risk a repeat. Medical unions held rallies in Dar es Salaam and Arusha demanding ethical standards and equal participation in global health innovation. In response, the Tanzanian government canceled the agreement and redirected its efforts. Within months, Tanzania launched a joint public health initiative with Cuba and announced plans to open an indigenous biotechnology and vaccine development center. Funding was secured through the African Union and private sector partnerships. A national survey in April 2025 found 77% of Tanzanians supported the rejection. For Tanzania, dignity and informed consent matter more than foreign funding dressed as generosity. Stay tuned for more stories they don't want you to hear. This is just the beginning. Angola sent a powerful message to Washington in 2025 by walking away from a proposed $5 billion U.S. infrastructure investment package. On paper, the deal promised new roads, energy grids, and a cutting-edge technology hub in Luanda. But the fine print revealed something else. The funding would come in the form of high-interest loans, contingent upon Angola terminating existing trade agreements with China and handing over exploration rights to U.S. energy firms. President João Lourenço rejected the offer with cutting clarity. In a press conference that went viral across the continent, he quipped, "If you want exclusivity, show us the money first." The remark wasn't just rhetorical, it exposed the deal's lack of upfront funding and its dependency on U.S. congressional approval that hadn't even materialized. Angola is the second largest oil producer in sub-Saharan Africa, with proven reserves of over 8.2 billion barrels. Nearly 60% of its crude exports currently go to China, with Beijing investing more than $20 billion in Angola since 2005. The Trump proposal was seen not as development, but as an attempt to choke off Chinese influence in Africa. Just 1 week after rejecting the U.S. offer, Angola signed a $3.7 billion infrastructure and mining agreement with China, funded, approved, and ready to implement. According to a 2025 survey by Angobarometro, 79% of citizens supported the pivot. Angola's stance was firm. Strategic assets aren't bargaining chips, they're national lifelines. Senegal rejected a $200 million U.S. democracy aid package that was supposed to support elections, civil society programs, and judicial reform. The controversy erupted when internal documents leaked to local media revealed a hidden agenda. The funding was tied to convert efforts to promote a pro-Western presidential candidate in Senegal's upcoming election. President Macky Sall acted swiftly. He summoned the U.S. ambassador and publicly demanded an explanation. 2 U.S. diplomats were expelled within days, and 3 American-funded NGOs had their licenses revoked pending investigation for foreign interference. Senegal has long been seen as one of West Africa's most stable democracies, with a voter turnout rate exceeding 65% in the 2019 general election. The idea that its sovereignty could be manipulated from abroad sparked mass outrage. Activists and students flooded Dakar's streets under banners reading "Our democracy, our rules." In retaliation, the U.S. froze a bilateral legal training program and warned of aid cuts, but Senegal held its ground. The government launched an independent election oversight commission funded domestically and strengthened regional partnerships with the European Union and ECOWAS for election security. A March 2025 poll found 74% of Senegalese citizens supported the expulsions, calling it a defense of democratic integrity. The message from Dakar was unmistakable. Foreign aid cannot come with political strings, or it's not aid at all. Dramatic culmination to Washington's 2025 diplomatic offensive in Africa. Egypt, a long-standing U.S. military partner, shocked observers by rejecting a new security pact from the Trump administration. The proposal included $1.3 billion in continued military aid and exclusive arms deals. But the attached demand was politically explosive. Egypt had to publicly support Israel's annexation of the West Bank. For President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the cost was unthinkable. Endorsing such a move would not only ignite unrest across Egypt's 110 million citizens, 70% of whom oppose Israeli annexation, but also jeopardize Cairo's regional standing in the Arab and Muslim world. El-Sisi refused outright, reportedly telling U.S. envoys, "We are not for sale." The decision marked a critical turning point. Egypt didn't just decline the offer, it turned eastward. Within weeks, Cairo announced exploratory defense talks with China and finalized a $1.6 billion arms procurement agreement with Russia, including missile defense systems and naval hardware. Despite Washington's threat to freeze aid, Egypt held its ground. Public support surged. A YouGov poll in April 2025 revealed 83% of Egyptians backed the decision, viewing it as a defense of dignity and regional honor. Even among U.S. allies, Egypt's rejection proved that not even decades of aid could ensure loyalty when sovereignty was on the line. The country's move sent a final, unmistakable message. Partnerships must be based on respect, not political coercion. In March 2025, the Trump administration proposed a $3.5 billion infrastructure package to the Democratic Republic of Congo. On the surface, it promised highways, power grids, and satellite communications. But hidden deep in the proposal were three explosive demands: exclusive mining rights for U.S. oil, companies in Katanga, a ban on Chinese firms, and the deployment of private American security contractors to oversee site protection. President Felix Tshisekedi responded with a televised rebuke: "Our resources built empires, but they will no longer be auctioned off. Congo decides for Congo." The fallout was immediate. Across Kinshasa, Lubumbashi, and Goma, thousands of protesters mobilized. Activist groups held a Minerals for the People march with over 90,000 participants demanding transparency and rejecting foreign control of the nation's $24 billion mining sector. Within days, Congo canceled all negotiations with the U.S. and instead signed a $3.7 billion joint venture with South Korea's LG Chem for lithium and cobalt extraction. It also reopened suspended Chinese contracts, but under revised terms with full public oversight. A poll by Congo Data in April 2025 revealed 81% of Congolese supported the rejection, and 78% believed foreign troops near mine sites posed a threat to national sovereignty. With the world racing for cobalt and rare earths, DR Congo's message was clear. We are not a colony of batteries. We are a nation with power, and we choose how to use it. 13 nations, one resounding truth. Africa is not for sale. What began as a calculated campaign of influence was met with an unprecedented wave of resistance. From mineral-rich provinces to political strongholds, African leaders chose sovereignty over short-term deals, and in doing so, they've reshaped the global balance of power. This isn't just diplomacy, it's a line in the sand, and it's a message to the world: never underestimate the will of the global South.